We have crossed a critical threshold.
As the war gets worse every day, reaching new levels of destruction, what would happen if a powerful country announced they were going to use a nuclear weapon? With tensions rising constantly, the big question isn't just about whether Russia or Ukraine will win, but if we are really ready for the consequences of a nuclear conflict. Find out why this situation could cause a major collapse, and how the recent events in Kursk and Donetsk might decide the fate of Ukraine and its allies. In this video, you will understand what's really behind Putin's statements, and why the future of this conflict could lead us to a point of no return.
The Russian leaders are going to look at this very carefully, and if they think that we are actually going to do the unthinkable, which is use a nuclear weapon, then they are telling us that they are not going to sit back and let us nuke them. We might act first. Now, you can say that out loud, but you have to read the words very, very carefully. And this is what happens when there is no strategy. Nuclear weapons were welcomed into the inventory in the 50s and 60s because they said there was no need for strategy anymore. You attack us, we annihilate you. Well, that all went away when the nuclear powers in the world effectively reached parity. Now, some people will say, well, we have more than China. China has less than us. Russia has more than us. But we have better. Look, when you have an inventory of thousands of nuclear weapons, whether they are just warheads or missiles, and you have got the delivery systems to deliver any one of them, you are courting Armageddon. And when you reach that point, you have got to have a strategy, because otherwise you back yourself into a corner, and that is where we are. Zelensky is backed into a corner, and we are in that corner too. We are just not on site. We are sitting several thousand miles away, feeling some degree of security that is not warranted, and that is another message that Lavrov has had.
If you like this content, please help me grow the channel with a like and a subscription. Colonel McDouglas, a respected military strategist, recently did a deep dive into the alarming situation surrounding the potential use of nuclear weapons. He explains how the current lack of strategy, in the face of nuclear-armed superpowers, could lead to Armageddon. He also points out that neither the United States nor Zelensky is safe, despite the geographical distance, and highlights the clear warnings given by Lavrov on this crucial issue. Over the past few days, President Vladimir Putin has addressed the growing speculation surrounding Ukraine's offensive in Kursk, delivering a clear message: Ukraine's attempts to destabilize the region have ultimately failed. Putin was very clear in his description, portraying the Ukrainian operation as a chaotic and desperate effort, an effort that, despite all the noise, failed to deliver any real results. Russia, he said, has not only weathered this storm, but is now beginning to reverse the Ukrainian advances, slowly but methodically pushing enemy forces back. But what's the real story here? The strategic thinking behind Ukraine's offensive in Kursk wasn't just about gaining land. It was a calculated attempt to distract Russian forces, forcing them to move important resources away from more critical battle zones like Donetsk and Luhansk, a well-executed diversion, but one that, according to Putin, came at a heavy cost to Ukraine. The Russian response, while swift and necessary, stabilized the Kursk front, allowing for a counteroffensive. Now, Ukrainian forces are spread thin, suffering heavy losses, and as we will see, facing the prospect of a total strategic collapse. President Putin addressed these developments at the Eastern Economic Forum on September 5th, where he laid out the objectives of the Ukrainian attack. Far from advancing their goals, Ukraine sacrificed over 9,700 soldiers, including some of its most elite units. It is these losses, not symbolic movements on the map, that will define the future of this conflict. According to Putin, Russia's focus remains clear: to destroy Ukraine's ability to fight, not just in Kursk, but in the critical Donbass region, where the real war for control is taking place. As Russia strengthens its hold on Kursk, a bigger picture is emerging in the Donbass, where the stakes are much higher and the battles far more consequential. In Kursk, the Ukrainian offensive was supposed to turn the tide of the war, a bold push to break through Russia's defenses. But as the dust settles, it's clear that Ukraine's ambitions have fallen short. Far from forcing a retreat, Russia has maintained control, using its superior tactical positioning to neutralize the Ukrainian assault. Since the start of this campaign, Russian forces have systematically dismantled Ukraine's capabilities. Over 81 tanks and hundreds of armored vehicles have been reduced to wreckage, while advanced Western-supplied weaponry such as HIMARS have been rendered inoperable, falling to Russian counter-battery fire. President Putin, addressing these developments, stressed that the Ukrainian leadership was well aware of the risks they were taking in Kursk, yet they persisted, hoping to distract Russia from its critical operations in Donetsk and Luhansk. But Russia's calculated response, stabilizing the front lines and slowly advancing, has left Ukraine in disarray. The scale of the destruction is staggering. Beyond the lost tanks and artillery, Ukraine has sacrificed manpower, over 9,700 troops in a matter of weeks. These are not just numbers. They represent the backbone of Ukraine's fighting force, now significantly weakened on the ground. Russian troops, having regained their footing, are claiming territory, using precision strikes to decimate Ukrainian forces. This is not a sudden collapse but a methodical retreat by Ukraine. The miscalculation at Kursk has left Ukraine not only vulnerable but dangerously close to losing its strategic foothold in the east. As Ukraine reels from its losses in Kursk, Russia is focusing all its attention on Donetsk, where the war for Donbass is entering a critical phase. While attention briefly shifted to Kursk, the real heart of this war remains in Donbass. This is where Russia's strategic focus lies, and this is where the future of this conflict will be decided. In recent weeks, Russian forces have made significant gains in Donetsk, particularly near the critical city of Pokrovsk. On September 3rd, Russian troops seized control of several kilometers of territory in a decisive offensive. This was no mere advance. It was a calculated push that brought them closer than ever to one of Ukraine's most vital strongholds. The capture of Kharkivka marks a key milestone. Kharkivka, a small but strategically significant area, represents the gateway to Pokrovsk. The Russian advance has been relentless, and with every kilometer gained, Ukrainian defenses are stretched thinner. Reports from the front lines suggest that Russian artillery fire has decimated Ukrainian forces, leaving their defensive positions in disarray. The question now is not if, but when Pokrovsk will fall. Pokrovsk itself is both a symbolic and strategic prize for Ukraine. Losing it would not only undermine their defensive strategy but open the door for further Russian incursions deeper into Donetsk. The offensive by Russia's Vostok forces has been swift and effective. In a matter of days, they pushed back Ukrainian forces several kilometers, securing vast swaths of territory. The implications of this are significant. As Ukrainian forces in Donetsk weaken, Russia is ideally positioned to launch even larger offensives, potentially threatening Ukrainian territory far beyond Donetsk. The setback in Kursk is thus compounded by an increasingly desperate situation in Donetsk. In conclusion, Ukraine's setback in Kursk and the Russian advances in Donetsk show a war that is changing. Russia has demonstrated its ability to withstand Ukrainian offensives and capitalize on enemy mistakes. With Ukrainian forces now struggling and Russia in a dominant position, the conflict could be entering a phase where strategy, rather than attrition, will determine the outcome. As Ukraine continues to face challenges both on the battlefield and on the diplomatic front, it is clear that the coming months will be crucial for the future of this war.